Welcome back to What the Health, the podcast that bypasses the bullshit and talks about the messy, confusing, and downright awkward parts of healthcare so you don't have to figure it out alone. And today, we're talking about something that way too many people deal with, but almost no one actually talks about. It is the most common sexually transmitted infection in the world. If you have ever had sex, hell, even if you haven't gone all the way, you've probably still been exposed to it. But people don't even know they have it. Yep, we are talking about human papillomavirus, HPV. And I have covered a ton of health topics on this show. But this one hits close to home. This one is personal because, guys, I have been there. I've gotten the call. I went through the panic and shame, the late night Google deep dives, and the awkward, so I have HPV conversations. And today I am putting it all out there, the diagnosis, the procedures, and everything I wish someone had told me before I started to spiral. So grab a drink, get comfy, and let's talk about it. All right, let me set the scene for you. I was sitting in my car, iced coffee in one hand, phone in the other, feeling like an absolute queen because I had just left my OBGYN appointment for the year and I was told, and I quote, "Everything looks perfect." Y'all, I walked out of that office feeling so smug, like I had just aced a pop quiz on my personal vaginal health. I didn't know it at the time, but I was celebrating a little too early because exactly 5 days later, I got the call. You know the call, the one where your doctor's office leaves this cryptic voicemail and it's just calm enough to be alarming. "Hi, this is Rebecca from Dr. Patel's office. We have your test results. Give us a call back when you get a chance. No rush." No rush? What do you mean, no rush? Obviously, I immediately pulled over with my heart racing and sweaty palms because my brain had already told me I only had 48 hours to live, because otherwise they would have told me that everything looks fine, right? Well, when I finally got Rebecca back on the line, she said words that stopped me cold. "Your pap smear came back abnormal. You have tested positive for high risk HPV." Excuse me? I tested positive for what? I wish I could tell you that I reacted with grace and maturity and handled it like an adult, but I did not. Instead, I think I blurted out something like, "Wait, what? I have an STD? What does that mean? Do I need to tell my mom or my partners? Am I going to have to call people like this was a COVID exposure?" And that was just the beginning. So buckle up because today I am spilling the tea, the fear, the shame, the Google rabbit hole that nearly sent me into a heart attack, and the awkward conversation with my partner, as well as the procedures that had me questioning every life choice I have ever made. HPV is the most common STI in the world, with nearly 80% of people getting it at some point in their life. And yet, no one talks about it. But that changes today, my friends, because let me tell you this. If I had to go through this emotional roller coaster that is an HPV diagnosis, you are damn right we're talking about it on this show. So let's get into it. So there I was, clutching my phone, parked outside a Target, staring at my steering wheel like it held the answers to the universe. Meanwhile, the nurse is on the phone being so calm, like she's telling me my Amazon package was delayed instead of casually diagnosing me with an STI that's linked to cancer. "It's very common. Almost everyone gets HPV at some point in their life. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to match my energy right now because I am spiraling." She goes on. "Your body might clear the virus on its own, but since your strain is high risk, your pap smear showed some abnormal cell changes, so we need to monitor it." At this point, I'm sweating. Okay, but what does that mean? Is this a wait and see situation or a start planning my funeral situation? Her response, while kind and gentle, did nothing to prevent me from crashing out. But before we dive into that particularly embarrassing WebMD spiral, let's take a little detour. So I've just gotten the news about my pap, right? So I hung up the phone, took a deep breath, and did what any rational adult woman would do. I started Googling. Because if you're like me, I mean, When I say like me, I mean a woman. You've probably heard the term HPV before, right? But when I got that call, I didn't have a clue what it actually meant. I mean, I had heard of it, but in the same way I've heard of quantum physics. I knew it existed, but I couldn't explain it if my life depended on it. So here's the deal. Let me break this down for you. HPV stands for human papillomavirus, but let's be honest, nobody calls it that. It's like the share of STIs. One name is enough. But here's what people don't realize. HPV isn't just one thing. It's a family of over 200 different viruses. Some strains are total freeloaders. You'll never even know they were there. Others cause things like genital warts, which again, I did not have. Praise God for small victories. And then there are high-risk strains, the ones that can lead to cancer. And here's what I wish someone had told me when I got that call, that HPV is insanely common. In fact, like I said earlier, it is the most common sexually transmitted infection worldwide. Almost everyone who has ever had sex has been exposed to it. If you were sexually active, even once, you're at risk for HPV. And here's the kicker. You don't even need penetration to get it. HPV spreads through skin-to-skin contact, meaning oral, vaginal, anal, even just intimate touching can pass it between partners. Condoms do reduce the risk, but they don't eliminate it completely. Around 80% of sexually active people will contract it at some point. 80%. Meaning if you don't have it, you are in the minority. And usually your body can fight HPV off on its own. About 90% of HPV cases clear organically within 2 years. HPV does cause almost all cases of cervical cancer, and it is responsible for throat, anal, vulvar, and penile cancers. And that's where the breakdown of HPV grading comes into play. So if you've ever received an abnormal pap result, chances are your lab result said something like CIN 1, 2, or 3 with LSIL or HSIL, atypical squamous cells of undetermined significance, positive for HPV. Well, what the fuck does that mean? That's not any help. So for those that were just as unfamiliar as I am, let me tell you what it means. So CIN stands for cervical intraepithelial neoplasia. And it's basically a fancy medical way of saying that some of the cells on your cervix are acting a little sketch. It's not cancer, but if left untreated, these abnormal cells could eventually turn into a cancer down the road. Doctors usually find CIN through a cervical biopsy, which means they take a tiny sample of tissue from your cervix, check it under a microscope to see if anything looks off. Think of it like a pre-warning system. Your doctor is catching these changes early so they can be handled before they become something serious. But how do the CIN and LSIL, HSIL relate to one another? So let me try to put this all together. LSIL and HSIL, which are acronyms for the nerdy medical terms low-grade squamous intraepithelial lesion and high-grade squamous intraepithelial lesion. And remember, CIN equals cervical intraepithelial neoplasia. So that being said, think of LSIL and HSIL as the red flags doctors see in your initial pap smear. If your pap smear comes back abnormal, they might do a biopsy to figure out the exact grade of the abnormal cells, CIN 1, 2, or 3. And here's how they connect. LSIL equals CIN 1, which means mild changes and low risk. So there are mild changes in your cervical cells. If your doctor does a biopsy, these changes usually match up with CIN 1, which means the abnormal cells are only affecting the surface layer of your cervix. Most CIN 1 cases clear on their own because your immune system can fight off HPV. What happens next is usually your doctors just monitor it with another pap smear in a year to see if it goes away. Think of LSIL CIN 1 like a tiny scratch on your cervix that usually heals by itself. And then we've got HSIL, the high-risk squamous intraepithelial lesions. CIN 2 or CIN 3 is related to HSIL. These are more serious and carry a higher risk with them. So this means that abnormal cells look more advanced and are less likely to go away on their own. If your doctor does a biopsy, HSIL usually corresponds with CIN 2 or 3. CIN 2 means moderate cell changes deeper than CIN 1, It may go away, but treatment is often recommended. If you have CIN3, this is severe cell changes affecting most or all of the cervix surface. If left untreated, it could eventually turn into cervical cancer. So what happens next with these two? If you have CIN2, your doctor might monitor it or remove the abnormal cells depending on your age and other risk factors. If you have CIN3, doctors almost always recommend treatments like a LEAP procedure to remove the abnormal cells before they turn into cancer. And think of HSIL CIN2 or 3 like a crack in your windshield. It's not a problem yet, but if you ignore it, it could spider spread and get worse. So to summarize all of that, the big picture, LSIL usually means CIN1, which is mild and often clears up on its own. HSIL means CIN2 or CIN3, and this could be moderate to severe and more than likely needs treatment. CIN3 is the last stop before cervical cancers, so doctors don't take chances with it. And this is why pap smears and follow-ups are so important, ladies. They catch these changes early so they can be treated before they ever turn into cancer. Okay, so where were we? Now that we've covered the basics of HPV, let's get back into my personal crisis. So at this point, it had been a few days since I got the call. In that time, I had spiraled through every possible worst case scenario. Treated Google like my personal on-call physician and fully convinced myself that I was about to become the tragic main character in one of those overly dramatic medical documentaries. You know, the ones where the screen fades to black, soft piano music kicks in, and suddenly there's a slow motion shot of me staring out a rain-streaked window while a somber voiceover whispers, "She never saw it coming." Then comes the unnecessarily zoomed in shot of me clutching my test results like it's a Shakespearean tragedy, while Sarah McLachlan's song swells in the background. But at some point, reality had to kick in. I needed to tell my boyfriend. I mean, but how do you exactly start that conversation? "Hey, babe, how was your day? By the way, my cervix is waging war against me, and I might have accidentally given you an STD. Yeah, no. I went back and forth in my head for days. Do I wait until after my procedure? Do I casually bring it up over dinner? What if I just never say anything? Which, let's be real, was never an option, but a girl can dream. Finally, one night I set him down. My heart was thudding out of my chest. I could literally hear it in my ears. My mouth was dry, and I was fully prepared for him to freak out, ask a million questions, or worse, look at me like I was some kind of whore, like I had done something wrong. So I took a deep breath. "Hey, so I need to talk to you about something kind of important." Immediately his face shifts. He's alert, like I just told him there's a gas leak in the house. "Okay, what's up?" At this point, my brain is screaming, "Abort, abort, just say you love him and go make him a sandwich." But no, I powered through. "So, I had my pap smear last week. Well, I got a call from my doctor and it came back abnormal." His eyebrows knit together. "Abnormal? What does that mean?" All right, here we go. "It means I tested positive for HPV, a high-risk strain of it." Silence. A solid 3 seconds of absolute silence. And then finally he speaks. "Wait, don't most people have that?" "Excuse me? Sir, I have been having a full-blown existential crisis, and you're just out here being all calm and logical? Like, where was this energy when I was Googling HPV death rates at 2 a.m. last night?" I blink. "Yeah, I mean, kind of, but it's still like a thing." He shrugs. "Okay, so what do we do?" We. This man said we. As if my cervix and his immune system were in this together. And at that moment, all the shame that I'd been carrying lifted just a little. "Well, I have to get a procedure to remove some of the abnormal cells, and after that, my body will hopefully clear the virus." Or that's what the doctor's office told me. "Okay, so when's your procedure?" And just like that, he had moved on. No interrogation, no judgment, no disgust, just acceptance. And that's when I realized I had been carrying around all of this shame for nothing. All of this fear, all of this secrecy for what? HPV isn't a dirty little secret. It's just a virus. But even after that relief, I still hadn't told Gina. And weirdly, telling my best friend somehow felt scarier than telling my boyfriend. Because there's something about saying it out loud to someone who really knows you, like knows all your dirty little secrets, that makes it feel worse. Fast forward to a week before my LEAP procedure. Gina and I had margaritas in front of us, chips and queso on the table, and the perfect vibe for me to ruin the mood. Gina was talking about some bullshit from her office, some girl named, well, let's call her Karen. Karen microwave fish in the break room. I mean, who the fuck microwaves fish? That is like, you're straight up going to hell after that. I was nodding along, pretending to listen, but in reality, my brain was a circling tornado of anxiety. You're being ridiculous, I told myself. Just tell her it's Gina, it's fine. But my brain refused to cooperate because even though I knew HPV was common, even though I knew she would never judge me, there was still this voice in my head whispering, what if she looks at you differently? So instead, I just sat there stuffing my face with tortilla chips. Like, finally, after what felt like eternity, I just very gracefully blurted out, hey, so I have HPV. And do you know what that beautiful creature did? She laughed. I mean, she full on belly laughed. Like I had just told her I accidentally texted my boss something dirty meant for my boyfriend. That kind of laugh. I blinked and said, like, I'm sorry, are you mocking my pain? And shout out to all you Princess Bride fans. If you get that reference, you know, you know. So anyway, Gina waved her hand, still giggling, and she just, no, girl, no, I'm not mocking you. Me too. I nearly fell out of my fucking chair. What? She shrugged and took a casual sip of her margarita. Yeah, I had it in college. My body cleared it. It's no big deal. No big deal. Meanwhile, I'd been sitting in crippling shame for almost 2 weeks, convinced I had to be medically shunned. And this woman was out here treating it like she was talking about seasonal allergies. Why didn't you ever tell me that? I demanded. She raised an eyebrow. I don't know. Why didn't you tell me? Touché, my friend. Touché. And that was the moment I realized just how insanely common HPV is. The only difference between me and Gina? She never felt ashamed. No one made her feel like she had done something wrong. Meanwhile, I'd been drowning in self-blame for weeks. And that's when I decided I am done being ashamed. If we can talk about the flu, COVID, strep throat, and freaking toenail fungus, then we should be able to talk about HPV without whispering it like it's a dirty little secret, because HPV is so common. But the shame around it, that is what we need to eliminate. And with that weight lifted, it was time for me to face the LEAP procedure. And let me tell you, nothing prepares you for that. But I'm hoping that I can share this portion of the story with you and help with any anxiety you may have if this is something that you're going to be dealing with soon. So remember earlier when I said we'd get back to the response from my doctor's office when I asked them if I was dying? So quick recap. I had just asked very seriously to the nurse, okay, but like, what does HPV mean? Is that like a wait and see situation or a start planning for my funeral situation? You know what that woman did? She laughed, not like a chuckle. She straight up knee slapping laughed. Like this was some kind of inside joke. Like I wasn't actively spiraling into medical crisis mode in the middle of a suburban Target parking lot. Sarah. And the way she said my name was like she was saying, you sweet, beautiful dummy. Sarah. You know that tone, right? Anyway, she went on, honey, you're not dying, not even close. But you do need a procedure to remove the abnormal cells. Dr. Patel wants to do what's called a LEAP procedure to make sure these abnormal cells don't turn into something more serious. Okay? Okay, I said hesitantly. You want to drop a few more details about that or? So she explained in very scientific words what a LEAP procedure was. I only understood about every seventh word that she said. But what I took away from her explanation was that Dr. Patel was going to burn off parts of my cervix. And I think I played it cool for the rest of our conversations. We scheduled the procedure for 2 weeks from that day, and I hung up the phone. I sat there stunned, wondering how I went from thinking I had just aced my personal vaginal health exam to learning they were going to set my vagina on fire. And, or at least that's what the dramatic part of my brain was saying. But after another thorough Google spiral, this is what I learned. And I'm going to try to give this, y'all, the down and dirty in a way that actually makes sense. Okay, so LEAP, a LEAP procedure. This stands for Loop Electrosurgical Excision Procedure, which sounds like something from a sci-fi horror movie, but I promise it's just a fancy way of saying we're going to use a tiny electrified wire to remove the sketchy looking cells from your cervix before they turn into something worse. Think of it like this. Imagine your cervix is like a garden and your doctor just found some weeds, aka abnormal cells. They have the potential to spread if left alone. A LEAP procedure is like taking a tiny high-tech weed whacker and carefully trimming away just the problem areas, so the rest of the garden stays healthy. Sounds simple, right? Well, kind of. So here's what actually happens during a LEAP. First thing is you get comfy in the stirrups. Yep. The same setup as a pap smear, except this time there's a little more action involved. They numb your cervix next. Don't worry, you don't feel pain, just a little pressure. They use a local anesthetic, which means you're awake, but you won't feel the procedure itself. And then the loop goes to work. Your doctor takes this thin electrified wire loop, think of it like a tiny lasso made of science, gently shaves off the abnormal cells. The electricity helps cut and cauterize at the same time, so there's not a ton of bleeding. And they may zap a little extra tissue just to be safe. If the cells were particularly feisty, your doctor might use a technique called electrocautery to ensure nothing sketchy is left behind. Basically, they smooth out the area like a finishing touch on a cake, except, way less fun. And that's it. You're done. The whole thing takes less than 10 minutes. Seriously, you could be in and out before your Starbucks mobile order is ready. But what does it feel like? This is what a lot of people are asking. So here's the million-dollar question. Does it hurt? The short answer is not really. It's weird, but not painful. Since they numb your cervix, you shouldn't feel the cutting at all. What you will feel is pressure. Maybe like a slight cramp when they inject the numbing medicine, and then a bit of an unsettling sensation when that tissue is removed. But honestly, the strangest part for me was the smell. Yeah, there is a smell. Because they're using electricity to remove tissue, there's a bit of a burning scent, like they really are setting your vagina on fire. And let me tell you, there is nothing that fully prepares you for the moment that you realize, like, oh, that smell? Oh, that's me. I'm burning. So what happens after you finish your LEAP? So you just had part of your cervix shaved down, or like I like to say, you had your vagina set on fire. Now what? So you can expect some cramps and discharge. Expect mild cramping, kind of like period cramps for a day, maybe two. But you will have some funky looking discharge for several weeks as your cervix starts to heal. We're talking about brown, black, even coffee ground like gunk. It's super gross, but totally normal. Also, no sex, tampons, or anything that goes inside you for about 4 weeks. Yep. No sex, no tampons, no douching, which, let's be real, you shouldn't be doing anyway. And if you are, let's have a different conversation. Your cervix needs time to heal, and putting anything up there could cause infection or disrupt the healing process. And then you have to have some follow-up. So your doctor will want to keep an eye on things to make sure the abnormal cells don't come back. Usually you'll have a follow-up PAP in about 6 months to see how your cervix is doing. The good news is LEAP works. It removes most abnormal cells completely. It reduces your risk of cervical cancer. And the chance of those abnormal cells coming back is fairly low, but that's why you've got to go to your follow-ups. Most people heal without complication and go on to have totally normal pap smears in the future. And so just to kind of summarize everything, I know that a LEAP procedure sounds intimidating. And yeah, it's definitely not on anyone's bucket list, but in reality, it is a quick, simple procedure that prevents cancer. So if your doctor tells you that you need one, don't panic. You have got this. And hey, if nothing else, you get a great excuse to sit on the couch, binge your favorite show, and let people take care of you for a day. So there you have it. The LEAP procedure in all its slightly uncomfortable but incredibly effective glory. It wasn't fun. It wasn't something I ever thought I'd have to go to, but you know what? It also wasn't the end of the world. And now, sitting here on the other side of it, I can tell you this. It was totally worth it because the alternative was waiting around, hoping my body would handle it, hoping those cells wouldn't decide to turn for the worse and give me cancer. I don't know about you, but if given the choice between letting my cervix play Russian roulette and taking care of business, I'll take the slightly awkward, mildly traumatizing doctor's visit every time. So after my leap, I did something I hadn't done in weeks. I exhaled. I let myself breathe again. I wasn't cured overnight, but the weight I had been carrying, that shame and fear, the what ifs, they weren't sitting on my chest anymore. I went back for my follow up 6 months later, and guess what? Clear pap smear. I went back again the next year, still clear. And eventually, my doctor told me something I thought I'd never hear when I first got that call. Your body has cleared the virus. I didn't want to act all smug again because we know how well that turned out last time, but I don't know if you've ever received good medical news after spending months convinced that you were on your way to the afterlife. But let me tell you, I nearly kissed Dr. Patel on the mouth and like tongue and all, because that was the moment I knew I had made it through. But here's the thing I would change. I did not have to go through this alone. I just thought I did. And that's why I wanted to share this story today, because if you're sitting here staring at your phone after getting that call, feeling your stomach drop and your throat close up, I want you to hear this. You are not dirty. You are not broken, and you are not alone. You are a human being with a human body, and it is simply doing its best to navigate the messy, microscopic world of viruses and cell changes. HPV is normal. It is not a life sentence, not a scarlet letter. It is not a sign that you failed at being a responsible adult. And the more we talk about it, the less power the stigma has. So if you take nothing else from this episode, take this. Talk about it. Talk about it with your partner and your friends and your doctor. Get your screenings, ladies, because catching it early changes everything. And for the love of science, get the HPV vaccine if you can. Gardasil is going to clear up HPV within a few generations. So if you're able to, please go get a vaccine. Because HPV doesn't need to be some terrifying, shameful secret. And if my cervix can survive an electrified medical lasso, then girl, you can survive talking about it. And listen, if you ever find yourself completely blindsided by something like this, sitting in a Target parking lot, gripping your phone after an unexpected STI diagnosis, just know this. You are exactly where you need to be. Grab a bottle of wine, a pint of ice cream, and that throw pillow you absolutely don't need, but suddenly have to have, which happens every time I go to Target. Because sometimes the best kind of comfort isn't deep advice. It's soft blankets and salted caramel swirl. And honestly, that's what this whole experience has been. It's been a lesson in finding comfort where I can and letting go of shame I never should have carried in the first place and realizing I was never actually in this alone. So if you're sitting with your own version of this story, whether you just got the call, you're waiting on results, or you're carrying around the secret you're too afraid to say out loud, I need you to hear me. You're not alone. Your people, the ones who truly love you, will probably surprise you the same way mine did. And if you don't feel like you have that kind of support, then let me be the first to say it. I see you. I hear you. And I promise this does not define you. If you ever feel like sharing your experience, I would be honored to hear it, whether it's a comment, a message, or just by subscribing and knowing you're part of this conversation. I hope you know that your voice matters. And if you're not ready to share, that's okay too. Just know that whenever you are, there's a space for you here. Because the only way we let go of shame is by bringing it into the light. And together, we can change the conversation. Thank you guys for being here, for listening, and for sitting in this moment with me. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and always choose kindness. Welcome back to What the Health, where we bypass the bullshit and talk about the messy, confusing, and downright awkward parts of healthcare so you don't have to figure it out alone. And today, we're talking about something that way too many people deal with, but almost no one actually talks about: It's the most common STI, sexually transmitted infection, in the world. If you've ever had sex, hell, if you haven't gone all the way, you've still probably been exposed to it. But most people don't even know they have it. Yep, we are talking about HPV, the human papillomavirus. Now, I've covered a lot of health topics on this show, but this one's personal because I've been there. I've gotten that call. I went through the panic, the shame, the late night Google deep dives, and the awkward, so I have HPV conversations. And today I'm putting it all out there, the diagnosis, the procedures, and everything I wish someone had told me before I started to spiral. So grab a drink, get comfy, and let's talk about it. This is What the Health. Let's get into it. All right, let me set the scene for you. I was sitting in my car, iced coffee in one hand. Ooh, that's super loud. Hang on. All right, so let me set the scene for you. I was sitting in my car, iced coffee in one hand, phone in the other, feeling like an absolute queen because I had just left my annual OBGYN appointment where I was told, and I quote, "Everything looks great." Y'all, I walked out of that office feeling so smug, like I had just aced a pop quiz on my vaginal health. I didn't know it at the time, but I was celebrating a little too early because exactly 5 days later, I got the call. You know the call, the one where the doctor's office leaves a cryptic voicemail that's just calm enough to be alarming. "Hi, this is Rebecca from Dr. Patel's office. We have your test results. Give us a call back when you can. No rush." No rush? What do you mean, no rush? Obviously, I pulled over immediately, heart racing, because my brain had already decided I only had 48 hours to live, right? And when Rebecca got on the line, I heard words that stopped me cold. "Your pap smear came back abnormal. You tested positive for high-risk HPV. Excuse me, I tested positive for what? I wish I could tell y'all that I reacted with grace and maturity, but that was not the case. Instead, I blurted out at something like, "Wait, I have an STD? Am I dying? Do I tell my mom? Oh my God, do I have to call people like it's a COVID exposure?" And that was just the beginning. So buckle up, because today I'm telling you everything. The fear, the shame, the Google rabbit hole that nearly sent me into a heart attack, the awkward conversation with my partner, and the procedures that had me questioning every life choice I had ever made. HPV is the most common STI in the world. Nearly 80% of people will have it at some point in their lives, and yet no one talks about it. That changes today, because let me tell you, if I had to go through the emotional roller coaster that is an HPV diagnosis, you are damn right we're going to talk about it on this show. So let's get into it, shall we?